I think everyone knows who they are. What do all their religious rituals have in common? Song, dance, and trance. Why? These rituals harness our powerful brain chemicals, which stimulate the emotions listed above. You see echoes of these rituals in surviving faiths today. Thoughts and comments before we continue?
Yeah. With this one, I talk about the World Wrestling Federation or Professional Wrestling, WWE now, about how when I was a kid I used to watch it and thought it was real, and I was this big argument. I would get into strong arguments with people who would say it was false. I was like, no, it's real. It's really real. I remember being a kid in Kenya. I was like 6 or 7, and having heard some rumor. At this time, you didn't have the whole international news type things. We had like 3 television channels in Kenya at the time that we'd get, and there would be very few things from America. So occasionally we'd get like a VCR of like a WrestleMania, and I heard this thing that like Undertaker had been knocked down and he was laying flat, and then he just stood up like a rake, like just like straight up, and I was completely confident that he did it. And he was like levitated, because that was like the stories that you were told. But then eventually I kept watching it. Me and my brother were watching it, and we realized in our teens that we got to the point where it's like, okay, I think it might have been early teens or so, that it was fake. It's not fake, but it's an act. It's a show. It's sports entertainment, and it was still popular to us. It was still interesting to us, and it still has. I mean, the viewership has dropped, but it's still something that people still find exciting because there's still storylines, there's still things. When you go and you watch Avengers, I used to read the comic books and like, this is amazing. And then now we see it on the big screen, like that's also amazing. Like all these things like that. I don't really think Chris Evans is Captain America, but it's still entertaining. It's still moving. I can still, because the content is still there. The storytelling is still there. The action and the emotive nature of it is still there. And one of the things that makes me quite suspicious about continued belief into it, and as I was saying before, people say faith is you're taking this away from somebody. I'm like, no, reality is more amazing. Like even the fact that people came up with these grand stories, and something I mentioned in the last conversation was that we've looked at these different religions and different places from these different disparate people in different locations, and we start seeing certain similarities. Like, oh, humans in this place behave in this certain way, but they're trying to express the same thing. To me, that shows that common earthliness that we have, and to me, that's more amazing. But for some people, there seems to be something about the belief systems that if they find out that it's not real, they really fall out of it and really takes out a core part of it. So that is the part to me, like why do people find and build so much on this to feel that it has to be this kind of way? Like if we find out it's not real, we still can't learn from it. I'm like, that's kind of tough. Like if you find that God told you not to murder, all of a sudden you'll think murdering is okay. I don't think you will.
No.
But some people seem to make that argumentation, and it's interesting and cool to me to see that people can still participate in these things, these rituals, even if they're not divine, even if they're not something else, even if it's not something you're directly a part of, you can still partake in and get some excitement out of it. Yeah.
I'll get into this more as this section goes on, but you'll see some interesting parallels, not just in religion, but other things too. I think we may have touched on it before, but what fraternities do with hazing, and they have like certain songs they sing together, things like that. You think of certain sports fans, like people doing the wave all at once or like cheering all at once. I even thought certain politicians giving speeches, like if you watch like the video footage of like Hitler giving a speech and like everyone stands up and does a salute and the marching band plays, it sort of plays on some of these things. Like it's that whole group ritual of like everyone acting in unison, everyone like looks up to something, everyone does the same motion. And I think it says later in here, but it talks about how if people all do these certain movements in unison, it'll actually reduce pain, it'll enhance energy, things like that. And it's been argued there's some sort of biological reason, because the idea is it's to sort of foment group cooperation. So it's like we're hardwired to do a lot of these things. It manifested in different ways, whether it's religion, sports, somebody speaking, fraternity, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll see some of these patterns play out in other things, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, there's a reading on self-reliance. It's Ralph Waldo Emerson, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That we're going to do a conversation on after this. It's going to be a breakdown. It's going to be super exciting. It's an amazing piece. But there was a line in there where he says, I like the silence in the church before the preacher comes in and starts preaching. It's paraphrasing before the preaching. And for me as well, like I still enjoy going to the churches and buildings like that and seeing that. But one thing specific, the preaching, yes, I'm not much a fan of it. but the grandeur of the rituals, like you said, with a group kind of activity, there's still something in that. Like
Yeah.
there's this one song by it's like I forget. It's called The Blessing. It's by Elevation Church. The first time
Huh.
I saw it was in a meme talking about like like who's going to pay the stimulus money. It's like the children,
Oh
like
yeah,
all the
yeah,
children.
yeah,
So there's a song where it's a grand song where you hear it and you see the performance, or it's like a 12-minute thing, and the people are performing and the people are singing, and you feel like people are like, oh yes, Jesus, yes, yes, like this, the children, and you get into it. Like I'm completely a religious as they come, but I still hear that song and can sing along to it. Things like
yeah,
Ave Maria, those things are still in there. When you see this kind of group effort and these group events, I went to this church in with a mutual friend of ours in New York. There's this one New Age church. It's like in this theater and play Hillsong, and they
yeah,
sing the songs. It's like this party kind of environment. Even if you don't know the language being spoken or the things, or you like, it's just something that kind of moves into you. And these things do tap into that, and that is something that I think is definitely true. And I think even if you aren't a believer in religion and faith, there's things to value and see to that. There's some things that are worthwhile in there that I think can also exist outside of those things. It's just that some of the people who believe seem to attribute those things to specifically those faiths. When I'm like, no, those faiths have been using things that have been working in humanity, and I think it's good to experience. If you aren't a believer, go check some of these out. If you are a believer, go check out other belief systems and see those things, and also find some secular situations that might be doing a similar type of thing, and see if that also doesn't spark something in you. But being social animals, it's there's genetic rewards for being sociable in general. Yeah.
well,
Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.